Hello and welcome back to Rams Talk Podcast. And we are here today to talk all about Derby's new signing up top, Jerry Yates. Now, it's a name that's familiar to Paul Warne because he's played under Paul Warne before. You'll be surprised to hear he played for him at Rotherham when he was first starting out in his career. He's been around a bit and now he's found his way back to Paul Warne playing at Derby. So, to give us the lowdown on Jerry, I'm joined by Luke from SwansCast. How are you, Luke?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, we'll get chatting about Jerry Yates.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the reaction on social media was a little bit strange, actually. It's probably the most negative reaction I've ever seen from a team signing a player, but negative towards the player. I mean, I was going to go to it a bit later on, but we might as well kick it off. It's a bit of a strange one. Could you give us a bit of an overview on Jerry and how he was perceived? Because it doesn't seem like he was perceived very well, but his goal return doesn't seem too bad.
Yeah, the Swans fans are not the most. It didn't really kick off, especially towards the end of the season. I think he's not here or there in terms of relationship with the team or the fans even. I think they expected perhaps a little bit more from him. But, he's come in to replace essentially Joe Perreault. Whether he was bought to replace him or not, I'm not sure. But ultimately, the way that things happened last summer, he ended up being the man who had to replace him in terms of the goal output. And Perreault had 2 back-to-back seasons of 20 goals in the Championship. And kind of as much as when he didn't score, he was always doing things that maybe freed other players up. So he might not have always been the man creating the damage. But I think because he was a dangerous player, other players then could do the damage if he was attracting the defence, for example. But Yates wasn't really replacing any of that. And the goal return, yeah, he did score 8 Championship goals. Most of them did come in the first half of the season under Michael Duff, who, to be fair, was the manager that signed him for the system that he was playing. But when that will change, when Michael Duff went and we kind of reverted back to more similar systems that we were playing before Michael Duff, he kind of changed things, and then we've changed back. Yates all of a sudden doesn't really seem to fit the bill anymore. Struggled a lot since Luke Williams came in. I think he only scored 1 goal actually since that time. So output, if Duff maybe didn't go, was looking easily at double figures, but that tailed off definitely. So must be a system thing having an impact there. But I will say for Jerry Yates himself, I think he's a massive confidence player. And I think the longer that went on, where he wasn't scoring, one really fitting in, one getting the chances, he's barely getting involved in some games, really low amount of touches and not getting any chances, which isn't always his fault, but sometimes you expect maybe off yourself a bit more, try a bit harder and all that sort of thing. I think it was just a negative spiral then, and the fans kind of got on his back, and it was kind of hard to get out from that.
Yeah, and that happens at clubs. I mean, most obvious one in my mind is Nathaniel Mendez-Lang at Chef Wednesday. He was probably in a similar position where, he wasn't rated by the fans. He was really low on confidence. And he's come to Derby and he's smashed it. So I think, yeah, Derby fans will be hoping for a similar sort of thing. But I mean, you talked about the system that he thrived in. What is that system?
I don't know if I'd say thrived, because we didn't really thrive as a team under Michael Duff. But he was finding his feet. There'd be enough said about it in different quarters of Swans fan base. I'll be a little bit less aggressive with my verdict of it. Michael Duff didn't perhaps get the time he needed to stamp his new way of playing into the team. We've come from a Russell Martin system. If you looked at Southampton last year, very high possession. And Swansea way historically has always been a possession-based system. Michael Duff went a little bit away from that, to put it lightly, and that was not looked upon favourably by the fans. And then when the results didn't also follow, that's kind of where it got bad. But in that system, Michael Duff was looking for a high press and to be a little bit more direct. And that's where maybe Yates benefited. When he's on it, when he's perhaps got a bit more confidence, or he's just joined a new club at the time, he wants to show himself to be a good player, I guess. He was high pressing, full of energy, running around a lot. It wasn't always the most substance with his technicality on the ball, but you would always say that he worked hard and he was running down the opposition, trying to get chances that way. And he was kind of someone that could finish a chance, wouldn't necessarily make the chance for himself. I think, the closer you are to the goal inside the box, probably the better opportunity he was getting to score. There's some that he should have scored that he didn't, of course, as well. some balls, especially later on, that when it comes to the effort, some of the fans think he should have thrown himself at maybe some low crosses a bit more, and it was an easy tap in, but we didn't see that. So that's some of the pros and cons there. I think there's definitely a good player there, but I just think it's so heavily tipped confidence-wise that sometimes you can easily mislead a player lacking effort for lacking confidence. I wouldn't say he necessarily lacked effort. I think it all comes with the fact that he didn't back himself a little bit, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about the direct style of play. I mean, that's more like Derby, to be honest. We play very direct. We used to be the same as you. We like playing possession-based football, controlling games, controlling the ball, and Paul Warne came in and changed that. And I think the fan base kind of had similar thoughts. You know, it was difficult to get on board. When the results go well, you always back it, don't you? And
Yeah.
you know, if when you get promoted, you go great. But when you're not winning games, it's pretty soul destroying. And yeah, I can imagine at Swansea, after playing that sort of possession-based football and having so much success over previous years, it was a bit of a shock to the system, and he probably just didn't fit in. I think that's what it sounds like to me, is that he was bought to play a style of football that maybe, you know, Swansea didn't want to play, and didn't play. And yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. But I mean, it's a bit of a weird question after what we just said, but we'll talk about his best position or best role. You know, you've mentioned he chases down defenders, he works hard. You know, that's his sort of, makes a nuisance of himself. That's sort of his game. Would you say his best position is sort of number 9 on the shoulder, pressing high?
Yeah, he's definitely a striker. I wouldn't operate in anywhere else really on the field, and I don't believe we saw that either. We didn't see it all too often, but I think maybe he's more suited to be, you know, in a two, in terms of two up top, rather than leading a line on his own. He is definitely better on the shoulder, trying to get in behind and hassle defenders, and be like a bit of a nuisance in that regard. I don't really think he's very good at holding the ball up himself. Quite often we lacked an outlet, you know, with him up top. Try and play it up to him, but we'd lose the ball, and then you can't get any foothold in the game, because he's not the biggest of guys, and like I said, he's not the most technical either, so you kind of can't rely on him to hold the ball up against what are quite, you know, difficult defenses sometimes in the Championship. But if you could be clever, there was a couple of times, like Patino, for example, was at Blackpool with him when they first initially both got signed, playing some balls through the lines where he can run onto. I think that's where you're seeing the best out of him, when he's on the shoulder of that defence. So if he could play up with another striker who's perhaps more of a target man, I think it gives more opportunity to play off the defence then, if he can win challenge for the second balls, potentially. I wouldn't play him anywhere else. Yeah, I think just striker for me is not really, from what I've seen anyway, any potential of another position.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that role that you're describing is one we tried to play a player called Connor Washington in last season, and I don't think it necessarily worked a lot of the time. I think, well, Washington had a lot of problems with injury, and we ended up sort of shoehorning Mendes Lang, who's a more of a wide player, into a more of a forward role that he's not necessarily as used to. So I think the fact that we've tried to do that all of last season makes me think we're probably going to try and do it again this season. So that sounds quite ideal, that we've got a player that's, you know, built for that sort of football. I know there weren't too many fine moments from what you've from what you've said so far, but I mean, were there any moments where he sort of like struck you as having a really good game, or had a really great moment, won you a game late on? What was his best moment at Swansea?
I'll pick two. There's one in terms of goal scoring, and just another one about what I was saying about his work rate and press. When the press under Michael Duff probably was at his best, we won at home against Norwich, and he was leading the line and full of energy, just hassling, you know, the players, and straight on them as soon as they pass around the back. When I think we got our first goal in that game from winning the ball, like in the corner of their own half, and it was due to that high energy in that press. And you know, that should fill you with confidence then to go on, if that's something that's maintained for the full team. But maybe that's something that the team needs to be doing consistently to get the most out of the player. In terms of his individual stuff that he's done, there's one, I think maybe his last goal that he scored, or might have scored one after, but he scored in the FA Cup in January. I forget the team he was against, one of the earlier rounds, but I think he came on as a sub, picked up the ball just outside the box, and he showed he can score from outside the box as well, which nobody really thought he could do that. So that was good.
You're right, mate.
Yeah, it's coming back from having flu, so I have a bit of coughing fit.
No, I'll give you a second to have a glass of water and compose yourself again.
My eyes are going and everything. But you can carry on, it's fine.
No, I appreciate it. So I mean, yeah, we've looked at sort of his better moments, and I guess we've got to sort of look at his worst moments as well. I mean, I did notice when doing a little bit of research for this, in the last game that he played in, which I think might be the last game of the season, playing against Millwall, got sent off after 11 minutes, which, you know, is less than ideal. Less than ideal for us, because it means he'll probably miss the first 3 games of the season for us this season as well. I mean, what sort of happened there? And you know, how does a player get sent off that early, especially in the last game of the season?
I'll be honest with you, I didn't actually watch that game, but from what I can recall, I think the ref lost control of that game quite early on, and I think he came on off the bench and was just kind of like eager to show maybe that, because he hadn't been having a good time at the stage of his Swans career. Second half of the season, quite poor, not really good under Luke Williams, not really starting many games. And I think he came on with the whole, like, I got a point to prove. And maybe the passions got a little bit flared up, you know, with the ref losing control. And I can't remember the exact incident. That was around the time where I did just move out and have a baby, so I wasn't watching all the games then. But
how dare you?
From what I understood from my colleagues on the podcast, the ref just lost control of that game, and it was last game of the season. It was kind of a bit of a dud match, and that was just kind of like the icing on the cake as a result of what you were watching on that day. So I don't think it was anything to worry about. It wasn't like he came on and was kind of like hot-headed and, you know, snap someone in half, like. But I think it was just a product of what was quite a poor game with a not really much to play for scenario at the end of the season. I think the only thing that could happen was Millwall go ahead of us in the league, and that is obviously what happened in the end. So both of us kind of on the beach, and bit of a silly game.
Yeah, you do get those, don't you? It's good to hear that you didn't come on and just fly and headbutt someone or something like that, which is not what you want whatsoever. So yeah, it is good news that he didn't kill anyone, which is always good. But that sort of leads me quite nicely into the next question about what he's like as a bloke. You know, you can often see footballers, they can either put on a hard man or a good guy sort of personality, but then you sort of delve down and they can be very different to either side. What was he like as a guy?
I don't think he was one of the ones that interacted the most with the fan base, you know, and I guess it comes with the fact that maybe we had a bad season, and then he was one of the players that did pick up a lot of that stick, because when you're not scoring and he's been bought to be your lead striker, as much as it's not his fault, what fees paid for him and all the rest of it, that's just kind of what happens. But from what I did see, you know, he got involved with the players quite nicely. There was plenty of group activities you saw them involved with outside of the football stuff. So I don't think he was isolated in any way like that. And I thought he fit in quite well. But just one of them where maybe he couldn't really express himself fully because the move on the pitch didn't really work out the best that it could for him. But I didn't see nothing bad from the guy. You know, he looked like he wanted to come here and try hard and fit in and get on with the fans and all the rest of it. You know, he'd be signing the shirts and stuff before the games and getting involved with the kids and all that, same as all the other players do. It's quite a good team down here for that sort of stuff, where all of the players is kind of expected to have that engagement when those opportunities are there or them activities are ongoing. So
yeah, I think Derby are quite similar to you guys in that regard as well. I think in recent years as well, especially, I think a few teams have, haven't they? They've tried to get that engagement more between players and fans, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on a few bits already, but sort of looking at his game as a whole, are there any sort of areas where you'd think maybe he needs to sort of work on that? Are there any sort of glaring issues where you think, I don't know, maybe he isn't sort of built for that sort of football? What do you reckon?
I just think the confidence stuff. I think if he's not so reliant on that, it would be better for him, because obviously the lack of confidence then affects his game quite a lot in terms of his clinicality and all the rest of it. I know that's quite consistent with a lot of players, but I felt with him it was another level more important than what we used to. And you'd see the difference, like there's a low cross in, and whether he's meeting the end of it or a yard or two behind because you haven't anticipated it. And being that lead striker, if you're playing on your own, you need to have that all the time. Otherwise, you're not going to get the opportunities. And then he's not getting the opportunities, and that's what's making his confidence go down. It's kind of a negative spiral. So I think for him, a way of managing that and maybe like an understanding of what his own strengths are, so that he knows what to play to on the pitch. Like he isn't going to hold up the ball and win balls in the air if you're hoofing it up to him up top, but playing off the line and off the last defender and just trying to get in behind rather than worrying about picking up the ball with a defender then in the way. I think he's better when he's past the defender already, if that makes sense. He's one of them players who need to get in behind for him to do damage. He's not going to do any damage if there's still a line of defence.
Is he quick?
He's not. He's just average. It's not like he's not slow, but he's not fast. You know, if he turns the defender and gets a run on you, he's probably quick enough to go and have an opportunity. But he's not gonna take someone on and beat them for pace.
That's good to know. And I guess one final question, it sort of links into everything we've said, is do you think he'll succeed at Derby? Obviously had a tough year with you. As you said, he had a good couple of years, or a bit of time at Blackpool where he sort of really shone, scored 14, 15 goals in the league. Do you think he'll succeed at Derby?
I think he will, to be honest. I think he's you said the Blackpool record. I think it was 20 goals, 8 goals and 14 goals in the 3 seasons he had there. And maybe they were more underdogs coming into the Championship, and that benefited him playing on on the break. And I think if you're doing something similar, he'll definitely suit your system more than ours. And I think he's got a point to prove now as well.
Well, that is good to hear, and it gives us a good boost going into the season. Although he'll only start playing 4 games in, but it's good to have him regardless. Luke, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find more of you?
Just type in SwansCast, all our podcasts on Spotify or YouTube as well. And Twitter's our main social media, but we're across most of them. So if you type that in, you should find us. And hopefully we'll get to catch you maybe later in the season as well.
I'm sure we will. Right. Thank you so much for listening. If you did enjoy, please do leave a like. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're on Spotify, Apple Pods, give us a rating if you did enjoy. If you didn't enjoy, please don't give us a rating. That's definitely not what we want. So, thank you so much for listening. I'm sure we'll see you soon. Derby seems to be signing players every 4 minutes at the minute, so I'm sure we'll be back. Luke, thank you so much for coming on.